The coolest feature of Bluesky has nothing to do with the application itself, but instead it has to do with the underlying technology that makes the Bluesky network work, namely the AT protocol, the personal data servers where your data is stored, and the whole idea of a true decentralized environment without replication and without centralized control. With Bluesky, you own your own data, or at least that's what they always say, but what exactly does that mean? And for that matter, in a fully decentralized environment, how can someone at Bluesky suspend an account, delete an account, or delete posts, especially if you own your own data? That's a question that a friend of mine actually asked me the other day, which led me down this whole personal data server rabbit hole. I've learned a lot, and if you stick around for just a few minutes, you're going to learn a lot about personal data servers and the AT protocol that the Bluesky network uses. I'm going to show you how to set up your own personal data server. I'm going to show you how to connect it to Bluesky. I'm going to show you exactly what it means to own your own data, and I'll answer those questions about what happens when somebody on a server somewhere tries to delete your account or delete all of the posts associated with your account. But first, we need to deal with some of the prerequisites for installing a PDS server, personal data server of your own, and that is exactly what we're going to do next. Okay, a couple of things before we begin. PDS stands for Personal Data Server, and in this tutorial I'm going to say PDS Server quite a bit. I do realize that that means I'm saying Personal Data Server server, but PDS Server just rolls off the tongue a little bit easier, so please forgive my grammar. If you want to roast me in the comments, go right ahead, but I'll be saying PDS Server throughout this tutorial. Secondly, I tend to speak very, very clearly, so pro tip for 2025, watch my videos at 2x speed. You can cover it all in half the time. I tend to speak very, very clearly, so it's still understandable, maybe 1.5 speed you can try to begin with. And of course, if I say anything that sounds really, really important, you can always just pause and rewind. But I think you'll find this tutorial goes by a lot faster and is just as enjoyable at 2x speed. So the first prerequisite for installing a personal data server is you have to have a domain name and you have to have the rights to configure A records for that domain name. I've got my GoDaddy account here. I don't recommend GoDaddy because I think GoDaddy sucks, but I do have a domain name here called bluesky.social. Now, you might think that that is a bit of an infringement on bluesky.social, but no. This is for a theoretical website, maybe for my favorite ski resort, Blue Mountain in Collingwood. So thus, the name bluesky.social, not Bluesky. At least that's what I will have my lawyers argue in court. The second prerequisite is you have to have access to an SMTP server. The reason why you need this is every new user that you create has to have their email address validated, and that is done through an SMTP server. I've just used resend.com to configure a temporary account. That's actually what the documentation recommends. Now, here is an interesting thing, though. I actually wrote a program to create 10,000 Bluesky users, and I didn't want to have to validate one email at a time. And since I did that on my own server, I was able to actually just do an SQL query and update the validated email field of each user. So to do things properly, you need an SMTP server, but if you want to be tricky, you can actually validate every email just by issuing an SQL query against your own database. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Obviously, if you want to have a personal data server, you need a server. So I've gone into my Amazon environment here, and I'm just going to set up an EC2 instance. I'll click on that Launch Instance button. I'll come into the instance configuration window, and I'll call this Bluesky PDS, why not? And then I have to figure out an instance type. What's the operating system of this server going to be? Now, right now in January 2025, it has to be an Ubuntu version 22 server if you're going to be using Ubuntu. 24 won't work, so make sure that it's an Ubuntu 22 server. Select that, and once that's done, a couple of things to configure. A micro instance is going to be fine for this. I'm not anticipating doing a huge workload. I do have to go in here and create a key pair, although when I connect to the server, I'm actually going to do this all through the user interface here. So we're not going to be doing any putty or anything like that. Once you've downloaded that name value key pair, go into network settings. Make sure that auto assign public IP address is enabled. You need a public IP address in order for your Bluesky server to connect to the Bluesky network. Then make sure that all access to the HTTP and HTTPS protocol is enabled, and then that's it. Launch your instance. In a couple of moments, your server is going to be starting up, and once it is, the next thing you're going to need is you're going to need the IP address of that server. Now, I'm going to use this user interface to connect to the server and connect to the command window, the terminal window on the server. So if I click Launch Instance, I'll get the opportunity to see what the public IP address is. I'm going to copy that IP address, and then I'm going to go into GoDaddy. I'm going to click on my Bluesky social domain name, and then I'm going to configure that DNS record and specifically add a couple of A records to that domain name that point to that IP address. Okay, your job now is to configure the DNS server for your domain name. You need to add two records, a top level A record and then a wildcard record. Right now, I've already got an A record, so I'm going to click on the edit button, and the value there, I'm going to set the value to the IP address of the server that I just configured. Then I'm going to click save. The next one that you need to do is you need to do the wildcard record and make sure that we've mapped the wildcard.bluesky.social or whatever your domain name is to that IP address as well. That's because you're going to have multiple users that register, and their registration name will be kind of their handle .bluesky.social. So if you don't have that wildcard record pointing at your IP address, all of those individual users won't be resolvable. So setting up that wildcard record, I'll click on that Add New Record button. It's going to be an A type. I'm going to put in a wildcard here, so put that bug splat in for the name, put the IP address in as the value, click save, and then at that point in time, all of your DNS record configuration is done. Now I'm going to head back to my EC2 instance and click that connect button so that I can connect to the terminal through my browser. I'm not going to putty or SSH or do anything cool like that. Once the terminal window opens, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check for the version of curl. And the reason I'm going to check for the version of curl is because, well, I need to use curl, and if the version fails, well then I can't use curl. I may have to download it or apt install it. I've got curl installed, so that's good. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste this command, which you can get from the installation instructions over on GitHub for the personal data server, that downloads the installer script. This takes just a second to download. Notice that I do have that installer.sh file when I do the ls command. Once that's on my local machine, well, just do sudo bash installer.sh and let the application install the server. Now, I was going to ask you a couple of questions before the full installation kicks off. First of all, it's going to say, what is your resolvable DNS name? So I'm bluesky.social. I hope your DNS server has been updated. It's going to ask you for an administrator email address. I'm just going to say admin@bluesky.social. And once that's done, boom, you can see that the installer takes off and we install the personal data server. Now, once you're done, it says, do you want to create a user? I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to create a user. I'll throw in my email address, potemkin@gmail.com. I'm going to provide a handle, so I'll say stormy.bluesky.social. Get it, Stormy? It was like blue skies, and it's stormy out. Okay, maybe it's not that Funny dad joke, I guess. But I've now created this user. It'll take just a second to figure this out. But once it's done, it'll end up giving me the DID, the unique identifier of the user. And it's also going to give me the password as well. So I'm going to save that for later. I'm going to open up a Notepad, Notepad++, not Notepad. And I'm going to copy all of that information and just save it for later. That password is a little long for me there. So I'm going to save that. And then in just a moment, I'm going to actually use all of those credentials to log into Bluesky, the actual Bluesky application. But before I do, there's a couple of verification checks that I need to do. One thing you can do is put in your domain name /xrpc/_health. Now, I pasted in example.com. Let me just update that with bluesky.social. And as soon as I type that in, that is going to give me the version that's installed, 0.4.74. That's a bit of a health check. So I now know that, well, I know my domain name is resolvable, and I know that my server is up and running, and it's actually responding to requests from the network. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check to see if WS dump works. Here I just do example.com, but even with example.com, this WS dump doesn't work, and that tells me I don't have WebSockets installed. So the next thing I have to do is install Python 3 WebSockets. That just takes a moment. Then when I do this WS dump, well, I don't get the message that it's not there. I get the message I can't find example.com. So again, I'm just going to update this to bluesky.social. When I kick this off, all of a sudden I'm getting WebSocket data back. So now I know that at another level of operation, my Bluesky PDS server is working. Okay, we've got to do a little bit of environment configuration on our PDS server here. Remember when I told you that the PDS server has to know about an SMTP server so that it can validate emails? That's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to do a little ls to see where I am. CD takes me home. CD from here takes me to the root directory. And then you can see that a beautiful folder, PDS. That's your personal data server. That's where all the configuration is. I don't think I can CD into that directory right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit the file using sudo and nano and pointing to the file, sudo nano pds/pds.env. And there you go. You could see all of the contents from that env file. But what I need now is I need the environment variable names for the SMTP server configuration. And so you can get those from the install guide, PDS email, SMTP URL, and then we also need the admin email address as well. I also need to put the API key in for the PDS email SMTP URL. I'm doing that all in Notepad. Copy that up, head back into the terminal window here, paste that in, and once I've done that, well, it's just a matter of doing the Control-O to write that information out, do the Control-X to exit out of here, and then once that's done, you're actually going to want to just restart your server so that those environment variables are read, and that's just a matter of doing sudo systemctl restart. PDS is the name of the service. That'll only take a second, and once you've done that, your environment variables are now updated with the SMTP information. Now, remember, I did say if you want to be tricky, you can sidestep the validation by just doing an SQL query of your own, but that's playing on an advanced level, and we'll deal with that at another time. Okay, we're almost done, believe it or not. I'm about to log into the Bluesky application and have the Bluesky application point at my Bluesky social PDS server. Before I do that, I want to do a quick tail on the log so that when I log in, I actually want to see some movement happening on my actual server. So I'm going to do the sudo docker logs -f PDS. That's going to tail those logs. When I run that command, it actually should push out a bunch of information already. You can see all of that JSON goodness being printed out. But what I'm interested in is I'm interested in seeing some movement there when I actually go and try and log into the real Blue Social application. Oh, that's not Blue Social, that is x.com. Okay, there we go. bsky.app. I'm going to come over here. Now, I'm going to choose a custom server. I'm not going to log in with Blue Sky. I'm going to log in with blueski.social. I'm going to click done there, and then I'm going to grab the handle from the user I created earlier. Now I could probably remember stormy.blueski.social. What I can't remember is that crazy password. So I'm going to go back to that file, copy that password out, Control C, Control V in the password field. Okay, I just wanted to move my screen around a little bit so that you could see the Docker logs in the background there. So I click next, and notice as soon as I log in, I start getting all of this movement on my log files on my server. When I log in through that Blue Sky application, it's actually going to my personal data server, the one that I just set up in order to grab information about the user and log the user in. Now, take a look at my user here. I'm going to click on the user's profile and click edit profile, and I can come in here and I can go in and I'll change the display name, update that. Stormy Skies, a little description. I'm a simple account created on the Bluesky server or something like that, created on a PDS instance. I'm even going to go in and upload a new photo, right? So update my profile photo. There's a Cthulhu right there. That's a handsome little fella. I'll click OK and update. And notice the motion that happened in the background as I save that. So I'm using the Blue Sky application, but I'm actually using it to update my profile, update my image. And when I do that, well, it's not going to the Blue Sky servers. It's actually going to the PDS server that I created. Now, again, I'm a first-class citizen here. I'm going to go look for some friends. I'm going to type in Scrum, and there's Darcy DeClute, scrumptuous.com. And I don't know, I think Darcy is worth a follow. So I'm going to click that follow button. I'm now following Darcy DeClute. So you can see now this account of mine, I can follow other users on the actual Blue Sky network. I can come in here, maybe add a little comment. This is I think this was a post all about those engagement accounts who keep posting each other's things and astroturfing each other. So all that engagement farming is horrible. So I'll put a reply there. Now there's a valid reply on another user's account. You can see that I'm doing everything that anybody would do on Blue Sky. No one would know that I'm a different account. I'm even going to CameronMcKenzie.com. Please give me a follow, and I'll ask a little question. Do you have any Git and GitHub tutorials? That would be awesome. By the way, if you want to learn Git and GitHub, I got some great tutorials on that. But I want to show you this account is now making a comment on my Blue Sky account. I'm going to do that reply here, but I've also queued up my actual account. So let me navigate here to my actual CameronMcKenzie.com Blue Sky account. And when I do that, what's going to happen is you're actually going to see in my account, I've got notifications. So it's actually going to say, hey, you know what? Somebody has liked a post and somebody has followed you and commented. So that account that's on my personal data server, it is 100% interacting with other accounts. And that CameronMcKenzie.com and that scrumptuous.com account, those accounts are not on personal data servers. Those accounts are on the standard Blue Sky server. You've seen that I've now set up a personal data server, and that personal data server can interact with any other server on the network, except I control the data, I control the authentication, I control the information. That data, all of my information, all of my records, all of my posts is completely and totally within my control. Now, one of the questions that I posed earlier was, what happens when someone deletes an account, or what happens when somebody deletes posts, right? How does this all work in a decentralized environment? Well, I've gone back into the terminal window for my server and I've typed in sudo PDS admin. And PDS admin is the tool that allows you to do all sorts of neat things on the server. And you notice that the PDS admin account allows you to create accounts. It also allows you to delete accounts. take down accounts, which kind of takes them offline without truly deleting them. Resetting passwords, you can actually even see creating invite codes there as well. They used to do that at the beginning of Bluesky. But the point is, whoever runs the server, in this case it's me because this is my server, has the ability to run those takedown or delete commands. And so if you're just using a regular Bluesky server, well, you're at the behest of the rules that those people put out there. But if you're using your own server, well, you're in complete control. Nobody can delete your account because you completely control it. Now, there are a couple of other interesting commands I want to show you here. You can explore this all day long, especially once you start getting into the SQLite accounts. But one command that you should issue after you set up your server is sudo pdsadmin request-crawl bluesky.network. What that's going to do is, well, I mean, it's pretty self-evident. It's going to ask the Bluesky network to come to your server and crawl all the information about the accounts that are on there so that that can then get aggregated and become available to the Bluesky network as a whole so that people can find your users. A couple other commands. Sometimes it's nice to do a sudo pdsadmin account list. Here I've only got one user here, but it shows you the handle, the email, and also the unique identifier for the user as well. And if you're doing some API stuff, having that DID for the user becomes very important. A couple of other things I'll show you right now. Sudo docker ps-a, you can see caddy, watchtower, and just the PDS server itself. So the whole thing is actually being run as Docker containers, which is pretty cool. I think one of the most important things that people want to take a look at, though, is all of the different files that make up the PDS server. So just type in sudo ls-lat/pds, and that's going to list all of the files in that PDS folder, one of which is account.sqlite. Explore that file. That's got all the information about the users on your server in there. So if you want to do a little bit of manipulation, well, you just go into that file. And this is one of the other super cool things about the personal data server. I mean, the whole thing is just implemented with a lot of very simple to use and simple to edit SQLite database tables. And there you go. That's how easy it is to create your own personal data server. Now, by the way, I got a couple of tutorials that show you how to use the Bluesky API, both JavaScript and Python. So head over to serverside.com to check those out. One creates a rushing disinformation bot, not rushing disinformation bot. Another creates a scheduling bot for the Bluesky API. So if you want to explore that, please check those out. And please follow me on Bluesky, CameronMcKenzie.com. That's where you're going to find me.